All information contained in this video is intended to be general in nature and is not intended to be considered psychological therapy, nor is it intended to be considered a replacement for psychological therapy. If you need help, please see a professional in the real world. Good day, Tarsin. About to sneeze for a second there. Good day, Ahmed. I don't know what a cousin file is, to be honest. Yes, it must have been. I don't know what a cousin file is. I got a feeling I know. If I was to infer, make some inferences, I reckon I know like a gauge of what it is. But I guess formally I don't know what it is. Probably some internet term. Yeah, I don't know what a cousin file is. All right. Okay. Interesting opening question, I must admit. What to do about liking one's own cousin? Well, yes, I know what a cousin is. Okay. Interesting opening question. What to do when someone likes their own cousin? Well, one factor to explore in this dilemma is the likelihood of relationship longevity factoring in social stigma. And we can probably extrapolate that social stigma will mitigate against any relationship longevity. Not sponsored by Coca-Cola. Therefore, we could extrapolate that the endeavor is somewhat futile. Yep, you just opened the live stream to an Alabama question. Yep, that's the opening question. What to do to mitigate against infatuation with one's own cousin? And the answer is that relationship longevity is unlikely due to social stigma, and therefore the endeavor to like one's own cousin is futile, as the relationship is unlikely to go anywhere. It will never leave the imagination. Yep. So yeah. The endeavor is futile. All right, where's my other half-drunk Coca-Cola can bottle thing? Here it is. Wow, oh, look at this. I'm gonna just leave me. Look at me go. Look at me go, boys. Interesting. I must admit, if anyone is presenting with this dilemma of infatuation with one's own cousin, I'll answer this one in a second. I would also dare to want to know, to what degree does a person who's interested in their cousin see other girls and explore other women? Do they have a limited exposure to females in their life and have therefore developed an infatuation with one of the few age equivalent females in one's life? Or is it more so related to, I can't remember what the terminology for it is, but there's like a thing where people tend to like what they shouldn't or can't have. Like the value of something increases proportionate to its exclusivity or perceived sectioned offedness. Sectioned off, it's not really a word, but I'm gonna like how much has been sectioned off or whatever. So the more that something, I think lust is the word, but there's another word for it as well. What is major depressive disorder? Okay, interesting. So major depressive disorder is a psychological, well, I guess I can give the sort of textbooky definition, and then after that it becomes a bit more fluid and dynamic. So major depressive disorder is a psychological condition characterized by low mood for most of the day, nearly every day for the last 2 weeks. So this person spends more time than not in a state of low mood or decreased or diminished interest in activities once enjoyed, and it must represent a change from functioning. So what this means is that there was 3 weeks ago, the person might have been functioning like a regular person in society. Not to say that a person with depression isn't a regular functioning person, but we have to use normative terminology because standardization and developing norms is how we figure out what's useful for humanity and what's not, basically, right? So major depression is characterized by at least 2 weeks of not being oneself, primarily explained by low mood, so disinterest in activities. More specifically, it might look like a person's laying in bed most of the day just browsing the internet, or not sleeping, or sleeping too much. Just diminished activity is like the main sort of thing. Diminished activity, as in not doing much and that you would normally do. Now, that's sort of the textbooky definition of major depression. But interestingly, a person can still engage in a lot of activity and have a low mood. So it really has two primary features. It's either low mood and or diminished pleasure in activities once enjoyed. But it means that a person might still go out and live like life and engage with society and get it and do whatever it is that they would usually do, but they still present with the low mood, which is that's low mood is not feeling good. Yeah, g'day Jay, g'day Cheek. G'day, Nut. Oh, Jesus. Almost, yeah, okay, hang on. What's all these questions up here? How to deal with the pressure to provide for family? Not your wife and children, but parents and siblings. How to deal with the pressure to provide for family? Not your wife and children, but parents and... Well, to deal with the pressure of providing for the family would be similar, I imagine, to providing for the wife and children. I mean, I would answer the question, but the question is, to what degree are the people that are being provided for, can they not provide for themselves? There's a thing in pressure called the breaking point. So a person reaches breaking point when they're under too much pressure and they quite literally break psychologically and possibly physically, but usually psychologically. And obviously within the pressure metric, I would imagine components of that are choosable. Like sometimes people can actually choose how much responsibility they take on. And if a person is reaching or on the pathway to reaching breaking point, it would be useful to examine the factors that they can control in their life and trying to remove them. So for example, if a person has committed themselves to extracurricular activities that require a lot of driving, forget about the extracurricular activities for a little while. If a person has to drive an hour away to go play football or soccer or something, just temporarily forget about that if the activity is causing more harm than good. So the idea really would be to isolate which activities are choosable, and then of the choosable activities, which are the ones that are costing more than they're worth, and then temporarily put them on hold, I would say. Do you feel like truly know who you are? Me? Or can people truly know who they are? Why is inequality rising in the economy? Unfortunately, I would imagine inequality is has always been present throughout humanity. What I think is a strong constituent mechanism that is causing inequality is it's possible to create an entity that makes money for you and you don't have to pay it, namely AI. And I think that that's a huge part of why inequality is continuing to rise, where, I mean, I guess it's always been like that. We go right back through history. There could be periods and times in history where inequality has existed because the labor wasn't paid, right? But it's the same mechanism today where it's just not paying AI is a bit more ethical than the specific places in humanity and humans I'm referring to. Yeah, the algorithm must be really cooked, because it's it's providing me a high level of viewership, but only 8 likes or 9 likes or whatever. It's interesting. The algorithm I guess this shows that likes isn't the only metric that the algorithm looks at to determine whether it's going to promote content, right? Obviously, for me, I like to think that the chat rate is probably the primary mechanism the algorithm is determined as making the stream worth promoting. But anyway, yes, I guess people can support the stream by, if you're watching on a phone, you just double tap the screen and it'll like the stream. Anyway, so I think one of the reasons why inequality is really paramount is because it's possible for people to generate wealth without having to pay the source of wealth, which in this context is AI. And stocks as well, maybe. Dividends. Because the stock market, when was the stock market created? Like 1900 or something? Like, when was Wall Street created? It's been less than 200 years. The New York Stock Exchange wasn't formally organized until 1817. Okay, so 200-ish. So less than 300 years. I mean, so around the time of the formation of the stock exchange, people in compounded by generational wealth, people that have invested over hundreds of years, 100 years or whatever, the wealth is really accumulated at the top through a transmission of generational wealth. Am I listening to music? Yeah, so I literally have two things playing. So yeah, I guess I've always wondered when people ever ask, what am I listening to when I'm doing this? So anyway, it's smoothed brown noise and ASMR at the same time. Yeah, so listen to ASMR. If someone doesn't feel like they need a companionship part of a relationship, but only a physical part or vice versa, is it wrong, or is something wrong with that person? That is a great question. If a person only desires the physical parts and not the companionship parts, is something wrong with them. How do we determine what's right and wrong? The law? We could all probably universally say that murder is not a good idea. But who said love requires love? So to determine if something's wrong or right, or if something's bad or good for a particular person, would require a universal formation or definition of wrong and right in the context of love. And let's say that two people are of consenting age and of consenting intellectual capacity, and they're not under any duress or pressure, and we can rule out factors like trauma. I would imagine that there isn't anything wrong with two consenting individuals of the age of majority, of intellectual capacity to consent as well, for a preference for physical intimacy only as their primary mechanism of the exchange of love. I wouldn't really see a problem with that. Because the love languages aren't exactly a legitimate science, but let's say that they are. Physical touch is one of the 5 love languages. So even though it's not a formally recognized framework for analyzing attachment styles in the context of intimate relationships, at least we can know that that's been identified as a key need in a lot of people. So you can rank it hierarchically, and let's say that need number 1 is physical touch, and if someone else has the same need, then it's a match. Obviously, to figure out something's wrong with the person, I guess you need to define what's wrong and right in the context of the human experience. But let's say that by all definitions of wrong and right, and I'm mainly talking about the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, but also the law can provide a guide or framework for determining what's right and wrong. Let's say that the person doesn't meet any DSM stuff, conducts themselves as a reasonable citizen relative to the law, then yeah, I don't really see a problem. And I guess you have to throw in religious and spiritual frameworks as well, because I know religion and spiritual frameworks probably are a component of the existence of the human experience in different parts of the world. So let's say the person is abiding by the law, abiding by the DSM, abiding by spiritual and religious frameworks, so I can rule all of those factors out, then yeah, I don't see a problem with it. It's not to say that if a religious framework says that two people can't be together unless it's for more than just physical intimacy. I'm not saying that religion is the sort of, and spiritual frameworks is sort of like, I guess you could say the law are the rules. The law is the rules. The DSM, religion, spiritual stuff are more frameworks or guidelines, guidance. You have to follow the law, so I don't have to follow religion. Gosh, I might get in trouble for that one. I look like someone that needs a psychologist. Oh, do I? Nice. How to make money if homeless with just a phone? Oh, I guess I'm not an economics person. Good ideas. How to make money if I'm homeless with just a phone? Buying and selling stocks, maybe? G'day, Roy. I want to be, hang on. Exploring shorts. This is a great question. I want to be a millionaire at 21. I am a computer science student. Now I am 18. Can you tell me what type of mindset that I should have in order to make these dreams happen? I want to be a millionaire at 21. Reminds me of a song. So freaking bad. Alrighty. How to be a millionaire at 21? Well, I would imagine the people would ask people who are millionaires in their 20s. So I'm 27 and I'm not a millionaire. Someone told me to come here for help. They lied. Oh, well. Anyway. Listening in will help. How to become a millionaire at 21? Well, I said, imagine the people to ask people who are millionaires in their 20s, and me being 27, not being a millionaire, I can only imagine theoretically what it would require. It would require a few things. It would require the person to save money, invest it, and eradicate debt all at the same time. Pay off student loans ASAP if you didn't have to already pay for them up front. Save money, don't spend it on Fortnite skins and Robux, and invest it if you can, and or put it in some sort of interest student account or something, or just save it, probably. An investment can probably look like stocks. I have a bunch of money in ETFs, exchange traded funds, because they're generally considered low risk. I mean, bonds apparently are low risk as well. Obviously, it's the stock market though, right? So nothing's low risk because there's always an inherent risk to the stock market, but the ETFs are probably in the lower end of the risk tier. I guess to be a millionaire is to determine whether it's cash in hand or assets, because I think it's probably easier to achieve millionaire status through assets than is through cash in hand or money in the bank. So to achieve millionaire status in assets, one would need to invest in assets. Obviously, assets are very expensive, like a house. So ideally, the asset would probably be stocks or something. Maybe Bitcoin, that sort of stuff, cryptocurrency. I don't know much about it. So stocks would be a good one. Usually money making requires a business. Like I think one of the keys to making a lot of money is to scale. What that means is that a salarized position is not going to cut it anymore. A person needs to have a salarized position and then have other mechanisms that are generating them, I guess what it's called is passive income, right? So one or more sources of passive income is essential. Not just active income, which is the salarized position. It would be passive as well. I think in terms of a mindset, though, it would be every once in a while, a opportunity or need will present itself, and if the person is in the right place at the right time, they will be able to establish a business on the basis of that need. Now, I can list an example in my personal life where this came about 2 weeks ago. I guess I need to provide a bit of background. So I'm a provisional psychologist, which means I'm still under training, although I'm at the end of the training, not the beginning. So I will hopefully ascertain full registration within the next couple of weeks. And it's interesting because as a provisional psychologist, I can't open up my own practice or own clinic. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't anyway, because this job requires collaboration with other psychologists to bounce ideas, and you really do need like years of experience, like at least 5, probably more, before you probably feel comfortable opening up your own clinic. But let's say I had 10 years experience. At the moment I have about 4 to 5. Let's say I had 10 years experience and I stumbled across this opportunity that I'm about to describe 2 weeks ago with 10 years experience. So I stumbled across a country town here in Australia that has a high proportion of mental health and 1 psychologist and a bunch of GPs, doctors, who can do mental health care plan referrals. So every once in a blue moon, these opportunities present themselves. But of course, I'm limited by the confinements of my registration at the moment. But there is a country town somewhere in South Australia that I know of that is in dire need of a psychologist, and I can't open a clinic because I'm limited by my registration and experience, but mainly registration, because I'd probably do it eventually. And you sniff out these opportunities and you capitalize on them. Now, I'm using that as an example to say that I know what I'm talking about, because I don't view psychology as a profession to make money. That's not the point. But the point is to illustrate a real world example in my life to give some validity or some credence to what I'm talking about. And there's absolutely an opportunity there. And I can, if I work around it with Medicare and stuff, and make sure I charge at the subsidized rate, everyone, because finances is a barrier too. So I just work around it with the Medicare subsidy rate, and everyone would be able to see me at a highly subsidized, if not completely free price. So it's about sniffing out opportunities. They always present themselves. You just got to smell them. G'day, Lee. What are your thoughts on flow state? The flow state is the flow state occurs. Like, it's legit. It's real. What happens is the mind enters a state of where it feels calm enough to turn off, or at least partially deactivate, its threat detection system, and it allows a person to enter a state of calmed focus because they feel to be in a place of safety. Whatever you say, cutie. Oh my God. Tons of big words doesn't make your point. Okay. Why would a person feel angry when they see crowds of people? What could explain why a person feels angry in the crowd? Look, why would a person feel angry when they see crowds of people? Possibly because the person views the crowd as getting in the way, and they have to navigate it and might be subject to social scrutiny because there's a lot of people there as they try and quickly navigate the crowd because they want to get through it, or can't go over it, can't go under it, got to go through it, through the crowd, and that's a crowd of people, and people can judge, right? So I would imagine that it's an intrusion or an obstacle that is alive. You're hot. Am I? Jewish Timothy Chalamet drinks Coke Zero. What the It is Coke Zero. Hilarious. As a psychologist, provisional, how do you define happiness? Ho ho! How can a person overcome their depression? Oh, okay. Alrighty. Big question. How can... Okay, fuck. Happiness. Fuck. Okay. To be honest, I was having to think about happiness today, actually. Okay. So I'll answer the question by going on another philosophical ramble. Hopefully everyone's attention spans can cope. Sorry, guys, if you can't. A person asked me a while back, what's the secret to happiness? And honestly didn't have an answer, so I just said something like, you define it or whatever. Some bullshit. I think I said 42 at some point, because I think it's a throwback to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But now I have a better answer to the question. Okay, because I thought about it, came up with a better answer. So if someone ever asks, what's the key to happiness, or what's the secret to happiness? I would say, well, there must be no secret, because why are so many people happy? Like, think about it. Why is the vast majority of people are happy? So it means there isn't a secret. Because if there was a secret, nobody would know. Or very few people would know. But it's the inverse. A lot of people know. Because there is no secret then to happiness. It's just some people have the secret and some don't, right? Because there's plenty of happy people out there, right? Unless they're faking it. So if the secret to happiness is that there is no secret, then what is it? Some people have it and some people don't. So what do the happy people have that the unhappy people don't? And this is kind of where the line of thinking in my head kind of ends, because it doesn't get very far, because it takes a while for me to come up with these ideas. I might just be spitting out ideas, but it's taken me a while to actually think about that, to be honest. I've been thinking about it for a week or so. Like, there is no secret to happiness, because if there was a secret, nobody would know what it is, or very few people would know what it is. It's not like a secret. The secret to happiness is some government conspiracy or some CIA, FBI, CCP, like top secret intel. It's just that the people that don't have the secret feel like they're missing out, and it feels like the value of the item is higher because they don't have it. But a lot of people have happiness, unless of course they're faking, which I don't think people are, right? So what do they have? What is the secret? So it's not like there's a secret to happiness. More like there's a set of guidelines or instructions that some people have and some people don't. So then happiness must be a set of guidelines. But what are the guidelines? There are no guidelines. It's not like you can just pull out the Happiness Act to 0 BC, like you can with like the legal legislation and the law, right? In the law, you can pull out like the Criminal Law Consolidation Act or something, right? Or the Family Law Act or something. But there's no guidebook for happiness, right? You can't just download it off the internet. So if a lot of people are happy, happiness isn't a secret. But some people are happy. Therefore, there must be something that they're doing that unhappy people aren't doing. So what are happy people doing that unhappy people aren't doing? What is the guide? And then if you do a quick Google search, you get blasted with a bunch of information about it. Different people defining it different ways. Find meaning in life. Do what you want to do. Find value. Find. It's always about finding something, right? Find yourself. Find value. Find the thing of interest. Find blah, blah, blah. Which means that happiness isn't something that people are born with. They have to find it. So then we know right off the bat that the antidote to happiness is inaction, maybe, right? So deactivation in behavior. So I could then say that, how do I define happiness? Well, I could define it by its antigens, which is deactivation of behavior. So doing nothing. Doing nothing is not happiness. So do we have to do something then, right? Something is happiness. But what if people find meaning in stopping and smelling the roses? That's not a particularly extravagant activity, but it's an activity nonetheless. So I think the conclusion then is that happiness is a set of guidelines or rules or values that the person comes up with for themselves. I mean, there's some objective things like sleep and diet and you always have to factor in the neurobiology. because obviously, like, you need to eat food, right? You need to eat healthy, right? And sleep. So I know there's like some objective dietetics things, and probably some medical things too. Don't smoke, don't drink, or at least don't smoke and don't drink in excess. I mean, I don't think there's any. I think more than one is in excess for smoking. I think you can get away with 1 or 2 standard drinks a day for alcohol or whatever. No more than 7 a week or something for men, and 5 or something for girls, women. But then there's the psychology of happiness. And I would imagine that the psychology of happiness would be something to be found that the person has to find from within and define it for themselves. Because if there was a secret, then no one would be happy because no one would know the secret. And some people are happy and some aren't. So the people that are happy must be doing something. And that's probably the key, is doing something. Doing something that the person finds particularly resonating, I would imagine. And then how can a person overcome depression? Well, by avoiding the antigens, avoiding the thing that creates it, which can be lack of action. It can be social comparison. It can be placing a standards upon oneself that aren't necessary. People aren't necessarily born depressed. The brain just doesn't decide one day that it wants to just disengage from reality in itself. It has to come up with that at some point in time. So it means that depression is developed, which it is. It's not just created suddenly. It is developed. So then it's like you have to find the antidote. If we know that the thing that caused it is not doing much, then the antidote for not doing much is doing something. It's like I'm allergic to studying. I love it. Is there a physical difference? Your nickname is Chaz. Nice. Is there a physical difference in people who are autistic and normal people? All right. Well, obviously, interesting question. I'll jump in there for a sec with so the current state of psychology doesn't contrast autistic people to normal people. The current state of psychology and psychiatry is a bit contested about its definitions, but one thing is for certain is now we're contrasting it in terms of neurotypicals and neurodivergence. Now, even that is not right, because neurodivergence implies that there is a neurotypical standard for the human brain to which to diverge from, and there is no standard for the human brain, because if we were all the same, we would be all the same. We'd be all robots. So an autistic, in other words, what I'm saying is an autistic person is a normal person, because of course, how do you define normality? Anyway, not that was related to the question, but it's important to throw out the latest scientific thinking. And the same with ADHD as well. ADHD and non-ADHD is not normal versus abnormal. It's just neurodivergent versus neurotypical. But even that's not right, because there is no standard for the human brain. Every anatomical structure is slightly different, if not completely different. Anyway, is there a physical difference in people who are autistic versus neurotypicals? The answer is no. Not from the outside, at least. Physical can mean different in the structure of the brain, yes, and also possibly in some research has shown that there's actually a difference in the setup of their eyes. You can use apparently there's a retinal scan that's showing efficacy as a extremely accurate diagnostic marker, but it's early in the research, so it's not certain just yet. G'day becomes strong. What is placebo effect? Haha, placebo. what is the placebo effect? Okay. So this is such a powerful psychological thing that they do in the research. So the placebo effect is a person thinks they're getting something and they change their behaviors because they think they're getting something. And that change in behavior fixes them. So they think that whatever the thing they got fixed them, but it was actually their change in behavior. That's what a placebo effect is. You think that you're getting a medicine or something, or a magic pill or something, but you're actually being sold. I'm going to use really bad words, but I don't care for now. You're being sold a lie, literally. But it's an ethical lie. It's good. It's ethical deception, and it's important. We need ethical deception. That's why we have controls and experimental groups. And it's actually called ethical deception. You're being sold a lie. Anyway, you think you're getting something. So let's say the problem is insomnia, sleep, and let's say you're given a fake pill, and then you actually fall asleep and have a good sleep. And then the next day the researchers told you that it was a nothing pill. It was literally nothing. Like it was a sugar pill. They gave you a sugar pill before bed. No, it was a nothing pill. It was literally just a jelly bean, but with no nutrients and nothing in it. But the person still falls asleep. So they think that they got a sleeping pill, but actually they got nothing. But they thought they got something, and then their behavior and psychology changed in response to the thing. They felt like, oh, this is working. I feel like this is doing the thing, but it's actually doing nothing. And it's actually that the thought of undergoing something, or the thought of receiving something, or the thought of going through a process creates the effect more than the actual effect itself. An actual interesting person on YT Live. Amazing. Me? Who is this interesting person? Find them for me so that I can steal their content. What are my thoughts on IFS? Internal family systems? Is that what you're referring to? Because if you're referring to internal family systems, that is very interesting. Yes, g'day Haji. All right, that is very interesting because I literally applied it today and it worked. So I guess my thoughts on IFS are positive. It's interesting because I think what I recommended was kind of counterintuitive, but it was effective. So usually when a person says they put on a mask in front of people, that's usually like assumed to be a bad thing, right? I actually advised recently that using the mask is actually okay to normalize it, because it was actually the thought of the person putting on the mask that was affecting them more than actually masking their behaviors. They thought it was bad because they had fractured their psyche, and their psyche had been split. And in identifying the different parts and then normalizing temporarily that putting on a bit of a mask is actually okay, it was almost like giving that one part of the person's psyche the permission to continue to be itself. The idea of an exile, or the idea of a part of a person's psyche being split off and then held down, is legit. And in learning about IFS, to be honest, the first thing that came to mind was, isn't this just the shadow from Carl Jung? Like, isn't IFS and Carl Jung like the same? It seems like it's the same thing. So to be honest, I've kind of just kind of meshed it all together into one in my head. Where the basic idea is a person will split off their psyche and their personality structure into different compartments in their mind as a mechanism to keep the negative compartments under control by the I don't even want to say like the positive ones, but at least the ones that are more, I guess you could say, stable. And in splitting a person's mind into different parts, it goes against the idea of a cohesive self and a cohesive whole, which is a fundamental part of being a human, is to be one with the self, to be like, to know who one is and to have a consistent, congruent idea of the self and then how that relates to the environment. So what can happen, and what I'm finding with the application of IFS and Jung, because honestly, I've put them together in my mind, and I'm sure there's some theorists out there that would be like, what is this guy doing? You shouldn't be doing that. It's like, well, they're both about splitting the psyche, aren't they? They refer to parts of the mind. They have a very broad, similar framework. Anyway, what I'm finding is that when a person splits their psyche, some parts don't socially develop at the same parts or the same rate as others. So it's almost like you've got the adult part and the child part, or the adult part, the teenager part, the child part. They're all stuck in different time bubbles or time warps in the person's mind. So part of them wants to move on and they can feel this sense of like being an adult, but then there's like this other part in their mind that kind of brings them back, and that's just another part that hasn't socially developed, because of course social skills require socialization in order to develop, and in order to socialize, a person needs to actually socialize, right? You can't develop social skills by talking to a brick. But obviously when you talk to people, sometimes that can be scary, right? So of course, if a person's psyche has been split, and we know that talking to a brick isn't going to bring those other parts back up to development, then they might have to actually engage with people to develop the social component that's been undeveloped. And that's what I'm noticing a lot as well. Well, one person calls a person immature, but actually it's more like some parts are mature and some parts are immature. It's not the global sense, the global self. It's the parts, some of the parts. And usually those different parts are stuck in a time bubble somewhere in the person's development, where they're like 5 years old, 10 years old, and then they get a bit of trauma and something breaks off and it stays there as a 10-year-old. But then other parts kind of try and move on, and then another part will break and it will just get stuck in like a time bubble. And as the person moves forward, they've got 50% psyche because 25% stuck when they were 16 and 25% stuck when they were 10. That's what I'm noticing. Or at least that's the theoretical framework that I've been applying it to. I don't even know if that's kind of how it was intended. And yes, I guess you're right. Jungian components are archetypal. Like they're more, it's almost like Jung stuff was more based in Greek mythology, like the Joker and the Maiden or something. I think, or the Animus or something. They definitely sounded more philosophical than IFS, which seems to be a little bit more, because, well, I mean, the one's called the Exile. I think there's one called the Firefighter. So the Firefighter sounds like it resonates more than the Exile. No self-confidence. Okay, the question is, no self-confidence, what to do? What to do about no self-confidence? Well, a starting point, because we always need a starting point, is to ask and then answer. What's the assumption in self-confidence? Are people born with it, or is it developed? And if people are born with it, then we're all screwed. We need to make an assumption somewhere. Or is it that the assumption that it's both? Let's say that it's both. Then you might ask, well, what's the proportion? Inbuilt or environmental? And I don't necessarily have the answer to that at the moment. I don't know, there isn't a definitive answer. But let's say that it's both. But let's say that self-confidence is created more so by social aspects than genetic and biological aspects. But of course, if a person has like a medical condition that can give rise to self-confidence issues, and you can probably do like a chain of analysis to find it that it did actually originate from biological or something. But let's just say that like it's mainly social. At what point does a person's self-confidence become shit? Is it at the 1 second mark from leaving the mother's body? No. A baby doesn't have the ability to think, or abstractly. That's all just impulse and electricity, right? At what point does self-confidence become bad? And the answer is there is no timeline. A person can be 10 years old and eventually, about maybe 15, it starts to drop off. They could be 25 and then it drops off at 30, right? So there's no age by which self-confidence becomes bad, which suggests that it's a timeline. It's a development. Self-confidence is a developmental thing. It doesn't just become bad. It doesn't just become good. It becomes over time, right? Which means that if we make the assumption that it's developed, and we make the assumption that people aren't born with shit confidence and that actually it's developed negatively over time, then the inverse must be true, that positive confidence is also developed over time. That must be our key to this question, to the answer. If we make the assumption that it's primarily social and that it's primarily, if negative confidence develops over time, then of course positive confidence must develop over time. So what are the specific things that a person can do to develop their self-confidence over time? Well, the answer is in the assumption, which is that we need to place a little bit less stress upon ourselves for not meeting the self-confidence metrics that we have ordained upon ourselves, because if we decide that self-confidence is positively developed over time, then we need to give ourselves some forgiveness by knowing that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That must be the other part to it. Reducing self-blame, reducing self-criticism. At what point am I supposed to become self-positive, self-confidently positive? A person might ask. If I'm 20 years old, when am I supposed to be positively confident? The answer, whenever you bloody well want. Self-confidence is not something that you just need to buy. It's not something that you need to drink. It's not something that you need to eat. It's not something that is locked behind a goddamn Fortnite loot box. You don't need to buy it. You just need to start it. Because if self-confidence was dependent on a physical object, then where the hell is the object? If self-confidence was contained in a battery, then let me eat all the goddamn batteries in the world. But it isn't. I don't even know what's in a battery. Should we find out? So you can't eat self-confidence, positive self-confidence. You can't drink it. Where the fuck does it come from? It comes from the opposite of negative self-confidence. What is negative self-confidence? Doing nothing could be negative self-confidence. So if we make the assumption that negative self-confidence is developed by doing nothing, then the inverse again must be true. Do something for oneself for once. Be selfish. Imagine if you could eat self-confidence. Imagine if it was something that could just be gulped up like a fucking drink. That would be cooked. It's not. It has to be developed. That's what comes to mind on that one. All right. How to reason well. I use let me read this out a couple of times. How to reason well. I use bias. Well, I already know the answer to this one. Okay. How to reason well. I use bias, fallacies, first principle thinking, questioning the fundamentals. What more I can learn? Okay. Well, obviously, hang on. What the fuck is first principle thinking? This sounds like you mix it. Oh, right. It's just questioning shit. It's just like Socratic questioning. First principle thinking consists of decomposing things down to their fundamental axioms. It's Socratic questioning. It's the shit I do every day. Right. Well, obviously, there's a bunch of problems in this question. First of all, how can a person reason well if they're using both fallacies, biases, and first principle thinking at the same time? Those concepts are actually exclusive. A bias and a fallacy is not the same or in the same pool as first principle thinking. Because a bias is looking for something that confirms a person's viewpoints, ignoring other viewpoints. You have a bias towards certain information. A fallacy is something that's false. So if your person is using a fallacy, they're using something that's false. The principle that founded whatever the thought process is that you're using is a false fallacy. So to reason well is to not use biases and to not use fallacies. Am I missing something here? Reasoning well is to understand the matter of interest from different perspectives and acknowledging the different perspectives, and then providing a reason, one or more reasons as to why the alternate perspectives are no good, and that it's your perspective that is number one. Not number one, that's not the right way of wording it. That your perspective is founded upon examining other viewpoints and then applying evidence to bolster your viewpoint and using evidence to deconstruct other people's viewpoints in an evidence-based, objective way, and not just using personal opinion biases or fallacies. The Art of War. No, I want to read it though. The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Yes, no, sounds great. I need to read it. I've been most of my time goes to reading psychology research. My brain can't download any more information. To be honest, I'm actually forgetting important principles because I think I'm reaching the limits of my intelligence, which is fucking annoying. Sometimes I just can't process information anymore, and I'm forgetting basic things. I think I'm reaching my genetic potential. All right, where's Elon Musk? Where are the brain chips? G'day random. G'day Brett. Well. How to get rid of porn addiction. Oh, Jesus. How to get rid of porn addiction. Well, we know in psychology that a person is likely to use an item of pleasure if the item of pleasure is easy to acquire. If it's easy to get and it feels good, people are going to use it, especially if it's free. We also know that stagnation or absence of behavior can cause pleasure seeking. So what that means is if a person isn't doing much, they might fill it with fun stuff. And that's usually okay. It just depends on what the fun stuff is. If the fun stuff is reading a book, I guess not everyone finds that fun, right? But if the fun stuff is like reading a book, then at least that's constructive. So I guess we can say that if we know that absence of activity leads a person to be promiscuous, you could say, but absence of activity creates the search of an activity, then we need to create a menu of positive activities. And not to say that watching porn is an inherently bad activity, but it can very well be that engaging in a particular activity too much is bad. So finding positive activities in absence of societal demands and expectations. Because of course a person's going to engage in fun if fun is easy. And of course a person's going to engage in fun if there's nothing else to do. So fill one's calendar with shit to do. And make the fun stuff hard to acquire. If anyone's tech savvy, you can actually go into your router, 192, you can type into the URL bar, 192.168.0.1. You can set up block lists through the router's intranet. And you can literally block URLs. So you just type in the numbers 192.168.0.1 into your web browser, and it'll lead you to the route, your internet router's login. Sometimes it's 1.0.11. Maybe there's a few other codes as well. I think routerlogin.net is another one too, but usually it's just the local internet number, which is 192.168.0.1. You can block the sites, and which makes it so that the item of pleasure is harder to acquire. And then when the item of pleasure is harder to acquire, and then that time engaging in pleasure is substituted with constructive things, then it's hard to remember to do the fun stuff because the mind is so engulfed in the constructive stuff, studying, hanging out with friends, just going for a run, double tapping your phone screen to like the stream. If anyone does it. How much do I make per year? Not enough to move out of home, that's for sure. Not enough to be financially independent. That's for sure. What are the stages of grief? Alrighty. Guys, hit me with the hard ones. Right, so obviously, actually maybe it's not obvious. Actually, maybe I have to take a step back on that one. Obviously, did I say obviously again? There's many models. Or I think one of them is the 5-stage model. Okay. But here's what the current research says on the stages of grief. We expect to see people following a non-linear progression through grief. Okay. So what does non-linear mean? It means that everyone processes it differently. There is no universal timeline. It's not 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, right? It's individualistic. Some of the factors that predict length are as follows: the trauma itself or the grief itself, how long ago it was, the severity of attachment to the traumatic incident or the grief. So it could be of low or moderate severance, severeness, but the person could have high attachment. It could be very severe, could have high attachment, right? I forgot what I said over here. Shit. The person's individual supports and coping mechanisms. How much the grief or trauma has disrupted the person's identity or disrupted their life. The presence of negative coping mechanisms, alcohol, aggression, blame, self-blame. I think to view it as stages, it places it in a realm of steps. It's probably more effective to view it as a continuum, but there's no start. The start is the grief event, but the finish is a person will just wake up one day or reflect one day and realize it has finished. So there's a start, but there's no end. And because the end, that implies that there's a universal end, and there is. It's non-linear. Everyone has their own sort of right and wrong, like right time, so to speak, right? So the end will depend on each individual person's experience. But yeah, as I said, there are some of the factors that predict length are like, what is the grief of interest? How long ago did it happen? What has the person done to improve the situation? Or what have others around the person done to help the person? What are the presence of other life stresses? Is the person being continuously re-exposed to the grief through other means, like other people blaming them, or they're looking at photos or ruminating or whatever? How much blame do they place on themselves? I know in my PTSD theory that there are two key mechanisms that help explain PTSD, which is the technical terms are assimilation and accommodation, and grief. That can be applied to grief as well. I can't remember which is which, but basically, when a person experiences a traumatic or grief-stricken event, one of two things, but usually two things happen: assimilation and accommodation. And one of them means the person changes the meaning of the event to make the meaning of the event fall in line with their beliefs of the world. Or the other process, where the person changes their beliefs about themselves to fall in line with the meaning of the event. So a person might believe in a just world, and then something unjust happens to them, so they change their beliefs that there is no good in the world, and that bad things do happen to good people, and that good things happen to bad people, or something like that. Instead of good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, they change to be like, bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. And they change their just world hypothesis. So that means that they've changed the way they view themselves in relation to the event. But sometimes a person might change the event in relation to themselves. So they might believe that was the traumatic event or the grief was that person's fault, and it's not my fault, it's their fault. So it's like an externalization of blame, I suppose you could say. With grief, because I've got a few clients that have this sort of stuff, they describe it like it happened yesterday, a lot of them, or like it might have happened a long time ago, but they describe it as if it was recent. And that's interesting. And that falls in line with the theory that grief is something to be processed. And the processing of it is to come to conclusions about the matter of interest. And to come to conclusions means to answer the questions about the incident. Why did it happen? Could I have done more? Who's to blame? Why did this happen to me? Should I have changed things? Could I change things? It could just be a statement. I miss the person. What am I going to do without them? Will I ever be happy again? To process is to process the key questions as it pertains to the particular incident. For the most part, I've come across this idea of it being a self-blame guilt thing, or a feeling of I can't move on because I missed the person. Will I ever be able to move on? Or it could just be a statement. Is it worth moving on, or something like that, right? Like the grief is usually lack of processing. and a person will move through the stages non-linearly, and there is no stages. I mean, there's the 5-stage model, like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And I do think that there's some validity to that, but I don't think it should categorize as stages, because that assumes that a person will start with denial, which is the initial shock, and they'll go to anger, which is frustration about the situation. They'll try and bargain with the higher powers to bring the person back. Then I'll go through a stage of bargaining, but then depression, and then eventual acceptance. It's almost like the stages of a film structure. It's more realistic to see it as, I guess acceptance is the end point, but not really accepting the incident, but more so processing it and coming to terms with it. I think is really the key idea. We're going to switch sides because it's getting dark. But the key with it is really processing, or coming to conclusions about the matter of interest, which usually involves answering the key questions or the key statements. But that's an oversimplification, and I'm sure there's more to it than that. But that's the extent of my reading and experience, and I find that people should describe it as like it happened yesterday, which is, I think, really interesting, because that's what I thought people would describe it as. Well said about just what hypothesis. I've asked you about it 2 days ago. Yes, the just what hypothesis is a part of grief, definitely. What do you think thoughts are? What are your beliefs on self-consciousness? Okay, so I actually have an extension upon this now. Finally, after doing a bit of research, finally coming up with a bit of it's because I did a bit of research on I wanted to know what consciousness is, but from the perspective of neuroscience, and I came across the answer. And the answer is that it's emerging. Like the models and theories for consciousness are emerging. It's not like solidified. But here's some of the latest thinking from neuroscience on what consciousness is, and it's not particularly resounding or funny or it's not particularly like, it almost seems like there's supposed to be this big grand answer to the question, but unfortunately the answer is that consciousness is just multiple brain regions activating in the brain simultaneously to complete their function. It's not really exciting, is it? But it is. It's the limbic system, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the executive functioning, and Wernicke and Broca's area over here, activating as per the requirements of that particular function of the brain at around about the same time to process the different functions that are required in humans to live and to think. So that's what it is. That's what consciousness is, unfortunately. From the perspective of neuroscience, at least. Philosophy would have its own infinite discussion on the matter. And what do I think thoughts are? I think thoughts are electrical charges or electrical impulses in the brain, which is also probably a bit unresounding, I would imagine. Yes, I think consciousness comes from the brain. Yeah, I do. If false dichotomy helps me think beyond A or B, consider other possibilities, why doesn't it help me reason better? Because you said knowing biases or fallacies doesn't help to reason better. Okay, interesting. So yeah, false dichotomy is seeing the world in terms of binary 1, 2, A, B or more, right? So to reason better is to break out of the binary way of thinking, which is A, B, 1, 2, right? And you break free of that to see the world as a continuum. But then what needs to be done
is if you envision the world on the, what are the axes called? Wait. I always get these two mixed up. So you see, the x-axis, right? So if you see the world, if you get out of the binary yes, no, and start seeing the world in a continuum on the x-axis, right, left to right. But, oh my God, there's actually one more axis. Actually, oh my God, there's actually two. There's the y, and then there's the z. But forget about the z for now. Let's think about the x. Let's say the person's just realized that a false dichotomy is no good, and they've gone from AB to continuum, but then what about this other one, the y-axis, going down, or in other words, depth of knowledge? Perhaps it's not enough to see the world from the surface, but also what lays beneath. Don't even get started on the z-axis. My God, seeing the world in 3D space. Because then you start to see that things go across, down, and then across again. If I find your answer reliable, I subscribe to your channel. Oh. Epic channel find. I just started site. Epic channel find. I just started site degree. Aha! I see the algorithm. Yeah, that's interesting. That suggests to me, Jen, that the algorithm has categorized my channel, because you obviously at some point in time, or the algorithm, the prediction model, has decided that you have an interest in psychology and related subjects, and now it's categorized this channel. Haha, there we go. The algorithm has absolutely categorized this channel. That's probably why it's being promoted now. Well, I like to think that the reason why it's being promoted is because your host, me, is actually like a bit interesting. But if it's not me, then it's just the subject matter, right? Okay. What's your question? If you give me, so if I find your answer reliable, you'll subscribe to my channel. Alrighty, let's see. What is the question? How can I master in industrial organizational psychology and understand what my workplace really wants from me? Despite positive feedback, my boss always picks someone else. Positive, there could be Perhaps there's two types of feedback: positive or evaluative criteria, which gives rise to the feedback in that realm, and promotion criteria. Maybe there's two types. Maybe there's a difference between working well and working to the promotion criteria, whatever the promotion criteria is. Perhaps the performance criteria is meeting KPIs, but the promotion criteria could be age or qualifications. Like the difference between a master's and a PhD, for example. Yeah. Maybe that's the secret sauce. What's a psychologist? What's a psychologist? Okay. Well, I'm a provisional psychologist, so I'm kind of halfway there. Not fully there yet, though. Real close, though. So, a psychologist is someone that has studied psychology. So what psychology, a person might ask? Well, psychology is many people think it's not a science, but it is science. Psychology is the science of people. It's to do with figuring out why do people behave the way they do? What is behavior? What is sadness? What is anger? What is love? Baby, don't hurt me no more. So psychology is the science of understanding people, humans. And psychologists are ones that take the concepts from university and college and deploy them to people. So cognitive dissonance is a psychology concept applied to people. What it means is that if a person is experiencing a world that they disagree with, they're going to get angry about it, obviously. But that might not be obvious for some people. Cognitive dissonance is a psychology concept that refers to you have an idea about things, and then there's another thing that you don't like that directly competes with your idea, and it makes you cranky. For example, everybody should be nice, regardless. Or another one, good things should happen to good people, and bad things should happen to bad people. But then, of course, sometimes bad things happen to good people. And that makes me hella cranky. And that is an example of cognitive dissonance, which is an example of the application of psychology concepts to humanity. Another example, a person might not be aware of their mind's natural tendency to negatively self-evaluate or to talk down to oneself, negative self-talk. It might just become so innate or a part of a person's psychological makeup that you could think of it like they've gone so far down the rabbit hole that they don't actually realize how far they've gone down. And it takes psychologists to identify this for the person or for humans, and then to reach down the metaphorical rabbit hole and try and pull them out, or if they're too far down, throwing some sort of rope and putting a little dumbwaiter on the bottom or something and just like, come on, let's go, buddy. Yeah. So psychology is about people, and psychologists try and apply the sciencey concepts to people. Or we try and, as well as trying to answer some of the other big questions like, why do some people get nervous for apparently no reason? Or what the heck is anxiety, more specifically? Why can some people fall asleep before their head hits the pillow and some people never fall asleep, or they experience substantial trouble falling asleep? Why is it that some people like themselves, and why is it that some people don't like themselves? Why is it that some people seem to be able to remember more than other people can remember? So these are the kind of questions that psychology aims to answer and then deploy back to humans. I am a provisional psychologist. So yes, there is a difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and I'm a provisional psychologist. So what this means is someone that is undertaking an internship, although I pretty much have finished it. Only a bit more to go, which is mainly just like waiting for assignments to get marked. And if my assignments will pass, then I will be able to ascertain for registration. So yes, not a psychiatrist. The other one. What's my favorite kind of cheese? Goat's cheese. Do I love my job? Well, I seem to love it so much that I'm prepared to sit on YouTube talking about it on live stream to over 100 random people. Yes, I do. Probably too much. Issue with eye contact while speaking. Interesting. Issue with eye contact while speaking. Well, one particular symptom is hard to make if a person is experiencing something that they don't understand, the correct thing to do is to go see a doctor in the real world and undergo an assessment if the person is finding that the thing is making life hard, right? But obviously sometimes finances and anxiety are barriers to seeing a doctor, right? So in presence of those barriers, I guess I can list off reasons off the top of my head for what could explain it. And then ultimately, ideally, the person would seek support in the real world. But if a person is struggling with eye contact in the context of speaking, the first thing that comes to mind is this thing called cognitive overload, which means that a person struggles to process speech. Like a person struggles to talk and process visual information at the same time. It could be a matter of their brain just gets overloaded. It would be interesting to know whether the person has a family history of autism. It would be interesting to know if there's a family history of anxiety. It would be interesting to know the degree to which the person socializes, and that could give rise to anxiety. It would be interesting to know to what degree self-defeating or self-negative statements are present in the person. Like when they're talking, do they feel self-conscious, for example? Whoa, am I tired? A little bit. Yeah. The best book on psychology for understanding humans. Oddly enough, I think screenwriting books and books on how to write novels are actually really good. So there's a book called Save the Cat, which is honestly opened my eyes a lot to how Hollywood writes movies. And it has a lot to do with archetypes and the general structure of a film. And once you see the 3-act structure in films, you can't unsee it. And you can also say, because films are stories and stories are a reflection of the human experience. So if you understand the structure of films and stories, you by nature understand the structure of life, because stories are a representation of life, right? So honestly, books on screenwriting or books on storytelling, like The Hero with 1,000 Faces, John Truby's The 21 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller, I think it is, or just Save the Cat by Blake Schneider. And all of the actually there's 3 Save the Cats, and they're all like, honestly, Save the Cat 2, part 2, is cooked. So what he does is he applies his framework for the 3-act structure onto like 50 or 100 film examples of classic films, like Jaws, I think is in there. And there's a few other classic films, but Jaws, I think, is one of them. Anyway, he has this like structure where he thinks that all films have the same 8 structures. Like there's 8, I think it says 8 or something, or 10. No, maybe it's 10. The Golden Fleece is called 1. So to understand people, I think, is actually, because psychology tries to understand the specifics, and screenwriting books and storytelling books provide a general framework. So I think a great starting place, I get this question a lot, and I'm actually reflecting, thinking, what did I read to really help me understand people? And oddly enough, I understood people through analyzing high-level structure first, and then the specifics. So high-level structure, what is high-level structure? Storytelling, right? Films, books. And what books provide high-level structure? Screenwriting books and novel writing books. Honestly, reading screenplays and analyzing the structure of art to give you a high-level format. And what you'll see, and what I see, especially in John Truby's The Anatomy of Story, 22 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller. I think it's John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. That was eye-opening, because one of the steps to becoming a master storyteller is to give your character an external desire, a goal. And everyone has a goal, even if the goal is just to get out of bed in the morning, to let the cat out, or let the dog out, or let the dog in, or let the cat out in. Everyone has a goal, an external goal. even if it's just to wake up and stop the phone alarm from beeping. Everyone has a goal, right? So study storytelling, because storytelling is obviously a reflection of the human experience, right? I thought I was thinking, what do you think about the new generation's mentality? I presume Generation Alpha. So I was born 1997, so I'm Generation Z. So I guess so Gen Alpha and Gen Z. So Gen Alpha is the teenagers of the world, Gen Z are the people in their 20s. So I think Gen Z and Alpha are both like the lower end. The upper end for teenagers is Gen Z, and the lower end of teenagers are people that are like 13, 14, I think is Gen Alpha, roughly in that time frame. Anyway, so what do I think about their mentality? Well, every time I talk to a teacher says they want to fucking quit and never teach again. Apparently classes are chaos. They were so chaotic in the public schools here in South Australia that we actually instituted a statewide mobile phone ban for public schools. Private schools can do whatever they want, but the public schools, students aren't allowed to have their mobile phones during class hours because apparently it was so catastrophic in terms of broken attention span, non-attendance, bullying, mental health, and recording shit, and just basically not concentrating in class. Now, whether that's the product of the teenager's fault or the kid's fault or the technology is more of a discussion than a simple blame game, right? Because can we really blame pleasure-seeking people from engaging in pleasure? And teenagers and kids, their whole life is encapsulated by fun. And especially for teenage boys and girls where the hormones start kicking in, then impulsive behaviors and impulse-driven stuff is like paramount, right? So if we wanted to assign blame, we would assign blame to developmental biology, really. These people can't help, teenagers can't help their brain is interested in reward versus why learn or why engage in rote memorization when I can just engage in reward? Why would I want to learn about trigonometry when I can quickscope my friend in Fortnite? So it might not necessarily be their fault that shit's a bit hectic right now, but just because, teenagers and younger kids, they don't have life experience. They don't know what's good and bad. They just know fun. They just know, I want Fortnite skin right now, right? I do think that there's one problem with the younger generations, and I'm Gen Z, so I'm part of the younger generations. I think that a lot of people can't cope with all the information that's being blasted into their brains. There's a lot of information out there. You can access the entirety, not the entirety, but you can access a great proportion of every piece of information ever inscribed by humans. Anything that was ever put to paper, anything that was ever put on a stone, anything that was ever inscribed in calligraphy or on paper or on any sort of recorded medium ever can be quickly accessed by just pulling out your phone and going, "Hey Siri." So with this information overload, which has never happened before, at what point in history can a person reach into their pocket and pull out the entire manuscript of human knowledge with just a couple of finger presses? It's kind of cooked, isn't it? Imagine what Aristotle or the other one, Einstein, would do with this sort of stuff. Imagine if someone told Aristotle, "Hey yo, Ari, hey buddy, you know how you have to go to like the old temple to like read a book? Imagine you could just like get out of bed and like they'd have to get out of bed scammed. You could just literally watch TikTok on your phone in bed, mate. Like, what do you reckon, Ari? That's pretty cooked, right? Imagine if you didn't even have to talk. You could just get the thing to do the talking for you. Imagine if you have to think. You could do the thinking for you. You'd be like, next thing is they'll be having these robots taking care of people. So what Aristotle would say next. Or something. So, the younger generations have got this unusual dilemma of impulsive brains coupled with unusually easy accessible information, which gives rise to the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is you think you know more than you do just because you have access to knowledge doesn't mean you know what you actually know. Like what I'm finding, especially with psychology, is that reading the concepts online is actually useless, to be honest, because unless you actually apply them, you find out that it's not as easy as the internet makes it out to seem. Oh yeah, just Don't think negatively. Easy, right? Dump the toxic boyfriend, dump the toxic girlfriend. Easy, right? No, not easy. It hurts. And what's to say that you aren't the toxic person? Anyway. G'day, Smile. I'm all right. How are you going? How to quit doom scrolling, TikTok and shorts. Aha! This is the stream that will stop it. You're here now. You're trapped. There's no escape. Don't scroll away. Don't flick up with that thumb. The algorithm has decided that this is the stream to stop people doom scrolling, because this stream provides sufficient stimulation to make people stop scrolling. Otherwise, there wouldn't be over 100 people sitting here listening to me rack on about psychology for like, what has it been, an hour and a half? So, how to stop doom scrolling? I'm going to give a silly answer because this is what came to mind. Someone else asked me about this a while ago and I just couldn't help but give a silly answer. Okay, I'll give a silly answer, and then maybe in the process of giving the silly answer, I'll hopefully come up with a better answer. Okay, so how to stop doom scrolling, right? So you need a phone, right? Imagine this is the phone, right? And on the phone is like scrolling, yeah. So how to stop doom scrolling? Here's what you do: is you get your phone and you just do this. And then you can't doom scroll anymore because the thing's gone, right? Just. All right. How to stop doom scrolling? Well, part of the reason why doom scrolling is so fun is because this thing called variable reward schedules, which means that humans, behavioral science, psychologists have figured out that the best way to reward people is randomly. So if a person does a behavior and they know the reward is coming, eventually they get a bit bored. But if they do a behavior and they don't know when the reward is coming, that keeps them engaged, right? It's random. We see this most prominently in gambling and the pokies, where you go, ding, 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 you never know what's going to come next. It could be a whole line of cherries or it could be nothing, right? So random reward is very powerful. And this is what's present on the Shorts feed and TikTok feed, where the person is randomly distributed reward, because they never know what's going to come next. They're just scrolling on and on and on and on, and you just never know, right? And a lot of people probably never imagine that they'll scroll from watching people dancing on TikTok to some dickhead stream name, I'm a Psychologist Provision, or Ask Me Anything. Like, you never knew that was coming up, but here you are, surprise, ding, 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 ding. You've been given the losing lotto numbers. Now you're trapped here. And now when you watch history, you've commented on the live stream, so the algorithm determined that you're very well interested in this content, so you're going to get recommended it all the time. Now you're going to see my big ugly mug popping up in your Shorts feed all the time. Now you're royally trapped. And that's how it all works. The algorithm tries to kind of figure out roughly what you like, and then it throws stuff your way randomly to keep you engaged, where it's like it'll give you something A grade, and then it'll give you something B and C grade, and then it'll give you some A grade again to keep you engaged. It's random. So what the key point is that it's engineered to be that way. It's engineered to be that you scroll along, you come across something that might be mildly interesting, and then you click on it, and then it keeps you on the platform. It's like trying to say, how do I make chocolate taste like shit? You can't, because chocolate by nature is designed to be tasty. Or if you don't like chocolate chips or whatever junk food of interest a person likes, it's hard because it's by nature designed to be tasty. Shorts feed and TikTok algorithm is by nature designed to be fun. Okay? So it's an uphill battle, but understanding the beast is the first step to taming it. If we know that the thing is designed to hook you in, then at least you can start to create some distance from it by knowing that the thing is not really your friend. It's a fake friend. It's the worst kind of friend. The one that gives you actually exactly what you want, makes you feel good. But on the surface, it's actually designed to keep you engaged. So the Shorts algorithm and the TikTok algorithm is like a manipulator. So the first step to taming the beast is understanding it and then viewing it as not a friend, but actually just a mechanism to keep you engaged. Scrolling along does not benefit you. It looks like it benefits you, but it's not benefiting you. It's benefiting ABC. Isn't that what Google's company is called? Meta or something? Oh, the Meta's the other one, Facebook. ABC or something. So the first step to taming the beast is understanding it. G'day, Sakuza. So, wow, I just absolutely butchered that far out. Sazuka. G'day, Robert. G'day, Chad. Hey, you and I have a similar names. Swap the D and the Z. G'day, notification. Welcome back. Wait. Naked Squirtle, you must be talking smack. It's all discipline. How to stop doing just terror scrolling. How to find purpose. This is a good one. How to find purpose. The good news is that deep within everybody's psychological makeup is the desire to fulfill purpose. It is actually quite literally built into us. Okay, so that's the good news. The good news is that I can say with 100% certainty that it is actually built into humans to want to fulfill the need. The thing is, purpose is like a cup. And what do you put in there? Bit of old vodka, love. Bit of whiskey and gin, mate. Just put a little bit of whiskey and gin, mate, in the fucking cup, mate, and have like a drink, and like you'll actually start to feel like, holy shit, mate. Or actually, for all you new people, you probably don't know, I actually can do me a couple of accents. I just gotta like hear the voice and I can start doing them. So like, to find like your purpose, yeah, what you do is you gotta get a cup, right, which represents like your meaning, and you gotta like fill it with something you actually find like meaningful. But like, what's the question is like, what the fuck is actually like meaningful to a person? And that is the key question, because it's individualistic. But perhaps one thing that a person can do, like fill their cup of purpose, is they can look back at what their family were doing, and that can give a bit of sense of like, well, my mum and dad were, if mum and dad were like painters, then maybe I'm gonna be a painter. Or mum and dad were like carpenters, maybe I'm going to be a firefighter. Or another question a person can ask, how to find purpose, ask themselves like what I want to be when they were growing up. When they were a kid, what I want to be. Fashion chops, mate. I can't hear myself, so I don't know if the accent's any good. You look like you're 23 years old. Are you able to stop saying like so much? But I like it, mate. Name a car for an edit. Oh, this stuff. I actually was putting one of these videos once upon a time. Name a car for an edit. I was putting one of these videos. Okay. Name a car for an edit. The DeLorean from Back to the Future. Hello, sir. Whoa, very official. I am 15 years old, experience mood swings. Get angry. Glad to. Okay, so obviously, I guess I should everything I say on this live stream is intended to be general information only. It's not intended to be therapeutic advice for anyone. So when I talk, it's just listing off the psychology concepts as they would pertain to a particular individual. So I would be listing off the concepts in general as they might pertain to the particular context of interest. Oh my God, I'm getting so robotic that I'm getting all my robotic disclaimers wrong. So if I was presented with a case of a teenager that was experiencing mood swings, right off the bat, I would educate the parents by saying that, hey, guess what? There's this thing called the executive functioning. It's right here in the front of the brain. This little bad boy up here is like the director in the brain. This bad boy right here kind of directs emotions. And this bad boy right here doesn't fully come online until at least the mid-20s. Somewhere in the mid-20s, this guy comes online. So what that means is that a teenager is their limbic system, which is a part of the brain, and their primal instincts, which is just a part of the brain really in many ways too, is in the driver's seat. Or in other words, teenagers process the world through emotions first, and rationality comes with a mixture of age and education and life experience. So those are three domains. Two of them you can control. Age you can't accelerate. Education, life experience you can control. Particularly education. That's probably the most malleable of the three. Actually, age is not malleable at all. You can't change that, at least chronologically. I mean, I think gravity can accelerate time. So maybe if you go stand on like Gargantua, if anyone can, bonus points if everyone knows what I'm referencing there. You go just swimming down into Gargantua for a little bit, where the big waves are. Maybe you can sort of alter time there. But for the most part, the director of the brain that helps control emotions doesn't come online until somewhere in the mid-20s, right? And that's just biology. So self-awareness of that emotion-focused processing is the current way forward is normal. Now, obviously, if a person is experiencing extreme mood swings, it's also important to try and factor in life factors like stress. Is the stability of home life, stability of finances, stability of housing, these sort of reasonable life variables. Because of course it's hard to be happy when there's bombs exploding, right? Like unless I would be very concerned if a person was happy and there was bombs exploding around their neighborhood. That would be weird. Why would a person be happy if everything around them is blowing up? Are they the ones pulling the trigger? Anyway, I digress. So obviously you want to have like a reasonable home structure. And if that's not causing it, if it is causing it, then that's where you would focus your attention, because obviously to fix something is to understand the beast that stands before you. So if aggression is being caused by instability in home life, then trying to stabilize home life is the key point. But if aggression is being caused by age, then self-awareness and being aware of what's triggering it, like compiling a list of triggers and memorizing them to avoid them. So obviously, the trigger list is independent. But what does fascinate me about psychology is, sometimes the strategies that I think are obvious and silly are actually the most powerful. And it shocked me a little bit that people don't know that deep breaths, one of the most basic strategies on the planet. People don't actually know that you can take deep breaths to calm down. I didn't know that. People didn't know that. But if you didn't know that, deep breaths can calm a person down. Literally requires nothing except lungs and oxygen in the vicinity. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Literally, some people don't know that. Deep breath in, hold for 3 seconds, deep breath out. Literally calms you down. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist that talks about the physiological sigh, I think it's called. So that's apparently the best way to do it. I think it's called the physiological sigh. Yeah, it is. Look, the physiological sigh. So is apparently the best breathing technique according to neuroscience. So stress can be managed through deep breaths. Some people don't know, or maybe it's never come across them to think about the world like this. So I'll provide the key point once again, that of the strategy of identifying triggers and actually avoiding them, like compiling a list of the things that piss a person off and actually avoiding them. That's another thing that is of use. I thought that was just innate and obvious, but it's not. So there we go. Aggression can be sorted through actually compiling a this pisses me off list, and then avoiding the this pisses me off list, and then constructing a this makes me happy list and doing those things. Okay. I am going to plug the channel and then I'm going to go. So, because I've been streaming for almost 2 hours and I need to go and binge eat. So for people that are new, thank you for watching. On this channel, you'll find two things. Well, one thing, me, but you'll find two things: psychology live streams and psychology videos. I've been umming and ahhing about doing a long form. Still probably going to say no on the long form, but there's a bunch of shorts that people can chow on in absence of my annoying voice and face in their live feed or shorts feed or whatever. But I am a registered provisional psychologist from South Australia. I am legit. I'm not some coach or some faker. I am actually registered and practicing. Provisional means intern, or that middle ground between student and fully registered, although I'm literally at the end of my training, not the beginning. That's why I speak in the way I do and feel confident enough to actually do this, because I do feel like I have achieved, or I'm extremely close to achieving, this minimum standard of requirement to be able to conduct oneself in the profession, at least theoretically. Sure, I missed a bunch of stuff, but I think also means I've got the basics. But yeah, I live stream somewhat frequently, every day almost, it seems, at the moment. But yeah, that's what you'll find on this channel. Yeah. I guess I should remind the viewers that everything I say is intended to be general in nature, is not intended to be taken as psychological advice. And the live stream is not intended to be a substitute or replacement for real world medical or psychological advice. I'm a real trained person. I am a real trained person, but you're not seeing me in the real world. So, and I wouldn't want anyone to see me in the real world. For ethical, complex ethical reasons. Let's not get into it. So yeah, it's not supposed to be like a replacement. But I hope everyone enjoyed. I'm sure I'll be around for another stream very soon. Hopefully you learned something.